Hi, Mr. Vice President. Nice to see you.
How you doing, Mr. Vice President? Pleasure to meet you.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'll tell you in a few minutes how well I'm doing.
I think you'll be all right.
You can smile. It's okay. You're sitting there staring at him. I promise it's okay.
So I want to jump right in because we don't have that much time with you.
Yep.
One of the themes of your campaign has been a need to return to a time of bipartisan compromise. You even mentioned at one point being open to a Republican VP. And I'm curious, what do you think that black voters who overwhelmingly believe that Trump is a racist and who've watched the GOP remake itself in Trump's image over the last several years, what do you think they hear when they say that you are open to collaborating with Republicans?
Well, look, the other option is we have eternal war. Democrats and Republicans never cooperate in any way, and we have a constant battle, and we get nothing done for black, white, Hispanic, anybody, number one. Number two, I believe we can get things done, and when we can't get compromise, we go out, we can't get something done, we go out and beat the Republicans. I'll give you an example. You know, at the very end of this last administration, they said once Trump got elected, before he got sworn in, we're going to get nothing done. I proposed a $9 billion bill that, in fact, gave $1.9 billion to cancer research, to the Biden Cancer Initiative, and another $7 billion for major research for systemic diseases. And guess what? We got it voted on 2 weeks before he got sworn in. I got almost 390 Republicans and Democrats to vote for it in the House and 94 members of the House and Senate. Where we can't get a compromise, like we couldn't get any support for health care beyond Democrats, and then we lost the House of Representatives. I went out in 2018 and campaigned in 24 states for 68 candidates, and we beat the Republicans on the issue of health care. You didn't hear anybody running around in those states saying, let's get rid of Obamacare, right? So you go out, and where you can reach agreement, you reach it. Where you can't reach agreement, you go out and you beat them. But you don't compromise on principle.
So, Mr. Vice President, in the case that you don't beat them, Democrats are always talking about compromise, playing nice, and some folks are just tired of hearing.
You don't hear me talk about playing nice.
Well, not play nice. Well, what I'm saying is Republicans don't play by the same rules as Democrats. And when they put up a fight, they will beat you down to the ground. And so when it comes to compromise, in the Senate now, if you get elected, and you try to implement some of the programs, and they are trying to put up barriers, and you continue to talk about compromise, then what happens?
What happens is that's why it's so important you nominate somebody who not only can beat Trump, but can win back the Senate. Who can go in and compete and help a Senate candidate in North Carolina, Georgia, Arkansas, Arizona, Texas, Pennsylvania, Michigan? That's one of the things you're going to have to ask yourself. It's not just enough for us to go out and beat the Republican and make sure he's out of office, but you got to be able to be value added in bringing back a Democratic Senate. We can win the Democratic Senate. Just like, remember, y'all criticized me for saying we're going to win back 41 seats in the House of Representatives. We won 41 seats, and we beat Republicans, sitting Republicans. So look, folks, once the Carney show goes through town once, and there's no pee under any one of the shells, next time it comes around, they go, whoa, I'm not so sure about this guy. The world has changed because of what Trump has done. And the American people, including independents and some Republicans, know how bad he is, know how much he's misrepresented, know how he's getting close to getting us in a war. I said, as the walls close in on this man, I'm worried he's going to get us to war in Iran. Unfortunately, I may have been right. The fact of the matter is there's a lot at stake in this election. It's not enough just to beat him. We have to keep the Democratic House, and you have to get a Democratic Senate, and you have to ask yourself, who's the best person to help get that done?
When it comes to compromise, recently people have been talking about Social Security. And Senator Sanders' camp has been hitting you on past comments about Social Security recently.
But they misrepresented it.
I understand that there was a video that didn't include its entire context.
Yeah.
But what I really want to talk about is it's an issue that's important to black and brown people who are more likely to rely on retirement income, more so than white people do. And so do you think, though, that it's fair for voters to question your commitment to Social Security when in the past you proposed a freeze to it?
No, I didn't propose a freeze. Look, we're talking about is the time. You mean when we went together and decided
Yeah, you talked
to
about it in the context of balancing the budget.
No,
so is that something that voters should be?
It was in the context of we saved Social Security during the Reagan administration was about to go under. And everyone from Teddy Kennedy on voted for that, to save Social Security. My proposal on Social Security has been straightforward from the beginning. We have to increase the taxes on people making over $400,000 so they pay the exact same percentage of their income as we pay for if you're making $50,000 or $20,000 or $128,000. That will make sure it's solvent for all the young people in this audience and also allow us to raise the amount of money for those people who are living way beyond what the Social Security expected them to live, so they in fact can have an increase in their Social Security payment, as well as if they lose a spouse and their Social Security is reduced. That's the way to make sure we are able to take care of it, make sure we're able to put everybody in a position where there's going to be Social Security for the next generation. That's what we should be doing.
So Bloomberg reporter Stephen Dennis said the other day, McConnell has told me he hopes to work with the next Democratic president to trim Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Says you need bipartisan deal to do so. Do you think that he's talking about you in that context?
No, not at all. Because you may remember when, in fact, this administration went after cutting Obamacare. I went up I was asked by the House to come up and stand on the Capitol steps as vice president as we were leaving office. And I said, this is all about trying to do away with the safety net. This has nothing to do with anything having to do with health care. This is about trying to get rid of the safety net. And I said, what they're going to do is they're going to significantly increase the deficit, which they did. And I predicted what would happen is the House was going to call for massive cuts in Social Security. What did the budget director, what did the head of the budget committee do? He proposed cutting Medicare by $500 billion, as I predicted would happen. And guess what? They didn't get it done because we went out and we elected a Democratic House. That's why we have to elect a Democratic Senate. There will be no compromise on cutting Medicare or Social Security.
No compromise at all.
Period.
That's a promise.
Period. It's a promise.
Another area, speaking of compromise, that matters to a ton of folks, of course, is immigration policy and a great need for some kind of collaborative solution there. Thing is, immigrant communities don't always look back on the Obama and Biden administration fondly on that issue. Recently, you acknowledged the pain caused by the deportation of about 3 million people. The other day at an event in Las Vegas, you told Hector Sanchez Barba, who worked in the Obama administration on immigration policy, you privately know where I was on that, but I'm not going to get into that because I was vice president. What did you mean when you said that? And do you and President Obama have disagreements about immigration?
I'm not going to get into that. Let me tell you what my policy is. My policy is family unification. What I will do is deal with family unification. I have some idea what it's like to lose family, or whether it's deportation or any other reason. It's tragic. And what I'm going to do is make sure we focus on family unification. First thing I'm going to do is make sure we protect dreamers. I'm going to send, in the first day I am president, I already have it written, send them the House and Senate, a immigration proposal that's going to provide a pathway for 11 million people. I'm going to end the idea that, for example, my wife went across the border in Brownsville with a member of Congress to help feed people on the other side of the border. Guess what? They're there seeking asylum. First time ever we've told people they can't come to America. That ends. The cage is closed. We, in fact, do not have, and the people are going to go back to school are ICE agents. No standing outside of hospital rooms. No standing outside of masks. No standing outside of a dentist's office or schools. We're not going to deport anybody who, in fact, has not in this country committed a felony. In this country committed a felony.
But why can't you give some voters some insight into why you can't answer what happened during the Obama administration? Why won't you tell us what the differences were? One of the things you do, look, I'll tell you what happened in the Obama administration. The president of the United States had everything but locusts land on his desk. The economy was going into a tank. I'm the guy that came up with the proposal to provide for $900 billion in recovery money. Got 3 Republicans to vote for it, speaking of compromise. Saved the economy, as most economists will lay out for you. But what happened was the president thought that the best way to get, and the team thought the best way to get a deal was to, in fact, enforce the law and get a commitment that they would, in fact, go forward and do massive change in immigration by a massive program to provide a pathway for
for 11 million folks. In the meantime, when the Republicans didn't pay fair, the president came along with DACA, first time that ever occurred, and he had a program for family unification, which the court struck down, saying you can't do it by executive order. The fact is that what the president, comparing this president to the present president we had, I think is outrageous. The fact is that we're in a position now where, look, 24 out of every 100 kids in our schools today is Hispanic, 24 out of 100. It's in everybody's interest, the wealthy, the poor, Republicans, Democrats, no matter who they are, to make sure this becomes an incredibly well-educated part of the community. That's how every major wave of immigration has occurred. We should be investing significantly for the safety and the sake of this country.
You've rejected the idea of abolishing ICE, but have said that the system should be reformed in some ways.
Yes.
What exact changes would you bring to ICE as an agency?
I would hold ICE agents accountable if, in fact, they stepped over my executive orders, which is no arrest of anyone outside of their school. Look at one of the things that's happening is, particularly for Latino and Hispanic kids, is the incredible pressure on them in terms of their sense of security. They go off to school wondering whether when mom comes and picks them up, is she not going to be there because an ICE agent was there to arrest her? Or she takes them to the doctor that she's going to not be there because she is, quote, undocumented, and an ICE agent is going to pick them up.
So how do you change the culture?
You change the culture by saying you're going to get fired. You're fired if, in fact, you do that. You only arrest for the purpose of dealing with a felony that's committed, and I don't count drunk driving as a felony.
Did you want to follow up on that? Because I can ask, we can move.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to sound like I'm being harsh to you.
I don't. I can play.
I know you can. I'm not trying to play here.
We only have a few short minutes, but I want to ask
Sure.
you one more question on immigration because it is important.
Tell me if I'm going too long.
How exactly would you detain immigrants, if at all, in a Biden administration?
The way we did when we reformed the system with the DACA, I would not retain them behind bars. They show
None of them.
up. No, here's what they do. They show up. Sometimes you have an ankle bracelet, you set a hearing. We have to surge. We have to surge to the border, to the areas where people are being held. Get rid of all the cages, everybody out of prisons. Be in a position where if the most you put on is an ankle bracelet, that you give a date, you're going to show up for an immigration hearing, and they show up.
Is that for children, adults and children?
Across the board. Totally across the board. And you shouldn't be you don't have to put any ankle bracelets on a child. The child shows up when, in fact, they're with the parent, and they have to unite the parent. One of the biggest jobs I'm going to have as president is reuniting these children with their parents. It's outrageous. And look what it's doing us internationally. We look horrible. We've always led by the power of our example, not the example of our power. And we are now viewed in the world as somehow having abandoned everything we say we stand for.
It's interesting you bring up reunification because actually there are a number of agencies right now or organizations right now working to reunify families.
That's right.
Who are in some cases separated about 2 years ago now.
Yep.
And it's really fallen on the hands of the ACLU and others to do that kind of person-by-person work. Should the federal government have done that?
Yes. And we should be helping those agencies and funding them along with our efforts in terms of federal funding to reunite them. We should pull out all the stops. That's what we've done in the past.
Do families that were separated by the federal government deserve any kind of reparations or any kind of restitution for what they suffered?
Yes, they should be made whole. They should be made whole in terms of, first and foremost, getting back with their families. That's it. I mean, reparation is repairing damage. Repair the damage that has been done. And that means we also have to make sure they, in fact, have their whatever health exposure their health problems they've been exposed to, or quite frankly, there's an awful lot of kids. I spoke to the International Association of Psychiatry in London. They asked me to speak along with the American Psychiatric Association. And you know what the greatest concern? Generation Z, kids between the ages of 7 and 17. They are most unstable generation in history because of the anxiety they feel. The anxiety they feel. And look at some of you are part of the Latino community. Talk about let people know the anxiety, the children you know of, or parents who may have an illegal parent and an undocumented parent in the country. It's enormous anxiety. And so that's why we should be providing them the kind of help that is needed and the family that help is needed to restore their confidence, restore their sense of who they are.
One final question for you.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
So it's a very simple question. Do you feel that the Democratic Party takes the black vote for granted?
I think they have, but if you know my record, and I'm just going to flat say it, I never, ever, ever, ever had. Not once. I'm a United States Senator because of the African-American community. The African-American community turns out in my state every time I've run at the same percentage in an off year they do in a presidential year. And if you notice, I have overwhelming support from the community because I've never taken for granted. That's what got me involved in politics in the first place.
Why is Senator Sanders leading you with black voters under the age of 35?
He is not leading black voters under the age of, look, just all I know is I'm leading everybody combined with black voters.
I'm winning.
You got everybody.
Yeah. Wait. Let's get this straight. Name me anybody who has remotely close to the support I have of the African-American community nationally.
Well, actually, Vice News just did a poll that showed that Sanders is a bit behind you, but he does have significant black support. I mean,
but
it's not something to sniff
behind
at.
me. He's way behind.
A bit and a ways is
Oh, yeah. Come on, man. Give me a break. You know better.
Come on, man, me?
You know better. You know better. There's a reason why I have more support of elected black officials. 3 former members of the chair of the Black Caucus, black mayors. I mean, come on.
On a very personal level, why do you think that black people like you so much?
Because they know I know them and they know I care from the time I've been 16 years old. I came home from law school and Dr. King had burned down.
But what does it mean to say you know black people?
It means that I've worked in the East Side. I deliberately went and worked for 3 years to make sure I was the only white guy that worked in the East Side because, I wanted to understand. I was involved in the civil rights movement, but
what did you want to understand?
What I want to understand, I didn't realize, for example, as the only lifeguard in the projects, I didn't realize that, in fact, we'd sit there in the key room on the half hour we had lunch. I remember Jamie Rolls asked me, Joe, do you have a jerry can? I said, what the hell do you need a jerry can for, Jamie? He said, I'm going to see my grandmother. She lives in South Carolina. I looked at him. He said, Joe, you don't understand. I can't stop at any gas stations. You don't understand, Joe. I learned that I lived in the middle of a city, that, in fact, these were all other athletes like myself. I happened to be the only white guy of the 17 people working there. And I didn't realize they lived in the middle of a city. They really didn't know any white guys. They didn't know the white community.
But you do get that just because you're the only white dude in a community of black folks doesn't mean that you understand them.
Well, no, I don't. You ask go to Delaware, ask anybody I've ever worked with whether they think I understand. I can't, my mother would say, you want to know me, come walk in my shoes a mile. I can't fully understand. Nobody can. I can't understand why I'm strongly supportive of gay marriage. I can't understand what it's like not to be able to love somebody that you care about, happens to be the same sex. I can't, but I know enough to know and see the pain. You can see the pain in people's eyes. You know it. You understand it. And I'm not saying I am black, but I want to tell you something. I have spent my whole career with the black community. That's why, especially young reporters, they go, well, God, they like Biden. I wonder why so many African Americans like Biden. They know me. They know where my heart is. And they know what I've done. And I'm very proud of it.
Do you worry at all that having black support in the primary doesn't necessarily translate to, winning a general election?
No, it doesn't worry me because look at the other thing. I'm the only guy who has overwhelming black support and gets white high school educated people to vote for him. Pennsylvania, Delaware, Ohio, Michigan. Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. So I'm not saying it guarantees me to win, but look, it's where I come from. I come from a working class family. I raised in a 3-bedroom home with 4 kids and a grandpa living with us. We weren't poor, but I never had any money. I was listed as the poorest man in the United States Senate for 36 years. When I got elected to the United States,
President.
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but we are.
I was trying to answer a question.
We have to give the audience time to
sure. No, I'm ready.
Give the people.
Hi, sir.
Hey,
Hey,
Feel free to get up and go walk around if you want.
can I leave?
you can stretch your legs.
No, you can't. Come right back.
Yeah, we're gonna need you to come back in a minute, though. Just
Yeah.
So we have a question from AJ. AJ is a PhD candidate at Duke University.
Great school.
Thank you, and a Drake alum as well. Mr. Vice President, there have been, after 54 deaths due to vaping-related illnesses, swift and sweeping action by Congress and the President of the United States to protect young lives. Yet, young men of color, and Black men in particular, among them, the leading cause of death has been police use of force. I want to know what you will do to protect these lives by preventing these deaths.
A number of things, but let me go directly to the specific question of young men's lives at the hands of police. Number one, in the legislation the President and I passed, it insists on us being able to go in and sue those police agencies, like we did in New York, like we did in Newark, that in fact do not and focus on stop and frisk, focus on dealing with the deaths of Black people, particularly Black men, particularly Black young men. And secondly, I want to make sure that when we look, there are good docs and there's bad docs. There's good PhDs and lousy PhDs. There are good cops and bad cops. And it's on the responsibility, and I make no bones about it, for every police agency that I work with, that it's simple. You have an obligation to root out the people who are bad. And if you don't, your whole department is held accountable. And that's exactly what we do under the legislation.
Can you speak a little bit more specifically, though, to protecting lives,
Yes.
protecting the lives and preventing the deaths?
Well, the protecting the lives and preventing the death, because you have to hold agencies accountable. Mm-hmm. You have to put people in jail when they commit crimes. You have to be able to go out and make sure you are able to protect them. You have to stop and frisk laws, which I think are illegal. You have to stop the way in which we deal with people of color, Black and brown. You have to do it, and the way you do it is you change the system by which you require body cams. You go out and you make sure that you have 2 cops in a car, that you have community policing, where you get out and you know who is in the neighborhood. You understand the person who runs the local church on the corner of the Baptist church. You know, and you speak to the people who run the local drugstore. You get to know them, because the communities know. They know who are the problems. And in fact, when you do that, when we did community policing and we had cops out of their cars walking, crime went down and arrests went down. Because what happens is you walk in a neighborhood and nobody wants to. When I did the community policing bill, what we did, we made sure that every cop went out there and gave people at the local store, the local drugstore, the local liquor store, gave them their cell phone, private cell phone. Because what happens, what don't you want to do in a community where there's extreme violence or where there's likelihood of violence? What don't you want to do? You don't want to be the guy to turn somebody in. So you guarantee the anonymity of somebody who said, Charlie's down the street just did such and such, and I can tell you what's happening. So you give the people in the communities anonymity, so they are not worried about retribution. And that's a practical thing that works. A practical thing that getting cops out on the street, 2 cops on the street, because they won't get out of their cars if there's 1 cop. My son was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware before he died. And he used to go down and sit down, for example, on the east side and what they call the bucket, where there's a high crime rate. He'd go down on Saturdays. Everybody knows where the best ball is played, which I'm not joking, where you go to get the best game. And he'd take my grandson, who was then 4 years old, and he'd sit there on the bench, and he'd get to know all the guys. And he'd go and knock on the window of the local cop sitting there in a car by himself saying, "Get out of your car, Jack. Get to know these people. Get to know the community." And it matters. It matters, in fact, if you, in fact, engage the community and get them engaged. Because the fact is, and it goes across all communities, not just communities of color. There's some really, really tough, mean white districts out there in cities. You know, so it's just being able to go out and let the community know you care about them. You are interested in them. You know, and so there's a big piece of that. And we have to change the way the criminal justice system works. Look, anybody arrested for consuming drugs shouldn't go to jail. They should go to treatment. We shouldn't be building more jails. We should be in more treatment. I'm the guy that put drug courts in. We haven't funded them yet. We haven't funded them. That's what we should be doing, diverting people Nobody should be in jail because but they should be in mandatory rehabilitation to try to get them fixed. When they're in prison, they should be in prison and they should be learning how to read and write. When they get out of prison, they should have every single right restored, including Pell Grants, including public housing, including everything. Because what do? We give them $25 and a bus ticket. They end up under a bridge. How are they going to get back to where they were? There's so many things we can do. It's within our power to do it. And that's why I'm so excited to be the next president. No, I really mean it.
Before you leave, let's try and bring in Hannah. Hannah, come into the conversation. What's your question?
Yes.
Prior to exiting the race, Senator Cory Booker wrote a piece for the New York Times about the need to stop being so dogmatic about public charter schools. In his piece, he urged voters to not dismiss good ideas because they don't fit into neat ideological boxes, or sorry, I got to do the notes.
That's
don't
okay.
personally affect some of the louder, more privileged voices in the party. As someone who's taught at a high-performing public charter school, what role do they have in your administration?
In my administration, first of all, no for-profit charter schools or private schools, period. No for-profit with federal money. Number two, if in fact it's a charter school, they should be held accountable to the same exact standard the public school is held to in terms of accountability, who they admit, how they admit, and so on. And so I'm not per se against charter schools that focus on particular skills that may be available. There's a good charter school in Delaware. There used to be Wilmington High School, and now what it is, it focuses on music and it focuses on talent that, in fact, a particular need. There is a mathematics charter school, but it is a public-funded school that, in fact, you compete to get in, and it has to be available for everybody to be able to compete. But Betsy DeVos is gone in my administration. She's done. The next Secretary of Education is going to have taught in a public school like my wife, like my daughter, like my family has. They're going to have been a public school teacher, for real. We don't bring the teachers in enough to make these decisions.
Let's end on that note. Also, what's next?
Thank you, Paula. So, Mr. Vice President, if you could rejoin us here, we have one more task for you to complete.
Uh-oh.
Yes.
Short answer.
Oh.
Yes. The
Well,
short
if Bernie can do it, I
answer.
can.
What'd you say? Wait, what did you say?
I was joking. I said, I saw Bernie on the way out. I said, if Bernie can do it, I can.
Well, you
No
might
one
not
ever
be able
accused me of
to.
talking too long.
So, in 60 seconds, we're going to ask you to answer as many questions as possible.
Okay.
Are you up for the task?
We'll find out.
All right. Here we go. What is your biggest fear?
My losing a child.
How many languages are spoken in the U.S.?
Probably somewhere over 120.
350.
350? How many
What-
do you speak? No, I'm sorry.
What food do you love that everyone else hates?
I'm not one of those guys. I don't like vegetables very much, so I'm probably okay.
Who was the first black member of Congress?
The very first black member of Congress I served with was Ed Brooke from Massachusetts. And I was close friends with John Conyers.
All right.
No, but that's a good answer, though. But the first ever black member of Congress was Hiram Rebels.
Thank you.
Who pays for your Netflix account?
I don't use a Netflix account. If I have one, I'm unaware of it.
Jordan or LeBron?
Jordan. Michael flies.
How'd it do, folks? Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. We appreciate your time.
Appreciate your
Thanks
time.
an awful lot.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Keep the faith.
Indeed.
Thank you, everybody. See ya.